Well, hello again. Welcome into 1017 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome again into Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan, way down yonder at the other side of the broadcast table, just making a lot of noise with her microphone.
I know, I'm sorry.
PLPC, Carla McCormick. How you doing, Carla girl?
I'm just still fussing at Ruben because he doesn't care how I look on the radio.
Well, you know, today's program.
I gave you the good camera and everything today.
Welcome our ace of the airways, Rapid Ruben Wright. So I did take into consideration that last week you guys were doing this.
So are you saying we need some marriage counseling?
Well, not exactly. You need to resolve some conflicts. Actually, you know,
he just needs to do what I tell him.
Yeah, just listen, Ruben. I was reminded in a conversation with a good friend of mine, Larry Andros, on Friday. We were talking Friday morning, and he reminded me of the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. You ever heard of him?
No. Should I have?
Yeah, he is the founder of something called the Center for Nonviolent Communication. It's dedicated to making the world a more compassionate place through nonviolent communication. And he says that we can resolve conflicts, whether they be conflicts between couples or individuals or friends, or in the workplace, or even between countries, that we can do that peacefully and powerfully through nonviolent communication. So I thought that we would introduce this today because the question is, you know, look at the world. Have we ever been? Look at our city. Look at our state. Look at our nation. Look at our world. Doesn't matter where you look. The question has got to be asked, have we ever been more divided than we are today?
And I don't know the answer to that, but it doesn't mean that we're still not divided today. We've talked about this before, the labels and the name calling and and you think about what happened over the weekend, and you know, that's just sheer hatred.
Yeah. And so I thought it would be good to introduce this work today. We're going to have Gary Tiemann on to continue our conversation with him from last week tomorrow.
Oh, great.
But we may do, other than Gary's program on Tuesday, we may introduce this today, and we'll see how far we go with it. All right, so welcome into Strategies for Living, folks. We are presented by CADA, the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse of Northwest Louisiana. Been helping individuals and families now for 60 years. We're also brought to you by Jerry Anderson State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing Center, by Jacob's Well, Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. Coming back to talk about resolving conflicts peacefully and powerfully today, here on Strategies. If we're talking addiction prevention, education, and treatment in Shreveport-Bossier for 60 years, we're talking about CADA. Let's talk about addiction. Let's talk about treatment. Let's talk about getting your life back. The Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, CADA, has been helping individuals and families in Shreveport and Bossier City for 60 years now. CADA provides intensive residential treatment as well as outpatient services too. CADA treats women with children, pregnant women, adolescents, veterans. CADA has helped thousands and thousands of people in North Louisiana from just about every race and ethnic background, every socioeconomic level, across every class line. CADA has helped single mothers, attorneys, teachers, nurses, doctors, construction workers, musicians, you name it. Life is better on the other side of recovery. Call 222-8511 or www.cada.nw. Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. 101.7 FM, 710 KEEL. PLPC, Carla McCormick, marriage and family therapist David McMillan, talking about the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who is he's the best-selling author of Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, a little book we're going to talk about today called We Can Work It Out, Resolving Conflicts Peacefully and Powerfully, The Surprising Purpose of Anger, Beyond Anger Management, Finding the Gift, and many, many more. His name is Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. His work can be found at the Center for Nonviolent Communication. He's mediated for over 40 years a wide variety of conflicts, everything between parents and children, husbands and wives, management and workers, Palestinians and Israelis, Serbians and Croatians, and he's worked with warring groups in Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Burundi, Sri Lanka, and Rwanda. And dealing with all these conflicts at all these levels, he is convinced, Carla and Ruben, that we can resolve conflicts peacefully and to everyone's satisfaction. Now, that might be surprising to hear, huh?
So it's not like me giving in, saying, okay, sure, David, you can have your way. It's us finding a way that it's a win-win.
Finding a way through. Yeah. He says the likelihood of conflicts being resolved in this fulfilling way is significantly increased if a certain quality of human connection can be established between the parties. So he's developed this process. He calls it nonviolent communication. It's his trademarked way, and it consists of thought and communication skills that empower people to connect compassionately with, now listen to this, with others and ourselves. So this can be used, this nonviolent communication can be used in families, it can be used with husbands and wives, with couples, it can be used with countries. So, I mean, pretty useful.
Yeah, that's pretty broad spectrum.
So what we're going to try to do is just kind of describe this evening the process, because I think it's very compelling. It's profound, and wow, do we need this in our world today? I mean, look in our city, look in our parish, look in our state, look in our nation. I mean, look in the world.
Listen to the talking heads on TV.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where. It could be Fox, it can be MSNBC, it can be CNN, it can be wherever. Wow. So the process can be used either when we ourselves are directly involved in conflict, or when we want to mediate, when we want to help somebody within our workplace, let's say. And that's what I think is the magic of this. So Dr. Rosenberg says that when he's called into conflict resolution, he begins by guiding the participants to a caring and respectful quality of connection among themselves. He says only after this connection is present do we begin to engage in a search for strategies to resolve the conflict. Now, this is what I find so compelling. At that time, when we're beginning, we do not look for compromise. Rather, we seek to resolve the conflict to everyone's complete satisfaction. To practice this process of conflict resolution, we have to completely abandon the goal of getting people to do what we want. Instead, we change our focus. We change it to creating the conditions whereby everyone's needs will be met. You hear that? That's so pretty profound.
I'm not just giving up.
No. We want your needs met, and you want everybody else's needs met that are involved. So, but you got to switch that focus, right? Everybody's got to be willing to first make that connection. So to clarify this difference in focus between getting what we want and getting what everyone else wants, let's imagine that someone is behaving in a way that's not fulfilling a need of ours. And we request that the person behave differently. He says in his experience, that person is going to resist what we request if they see us as only interested in getting our own needs met. And if they don't trust that we're equally concerned with meeting their needs. Genuine cooperation is inspired when participants trust that their own needs and values will be respectfully addressed. So the nonviolent communication process is based on respectful practices that foster genuine cooperation. So the way to do this, it's using the nonviolent communication to resolve conflict. It involves expressing our own needs, sensing the needs of others, regardless of how others are expressing themselves. That's a big one. Regardless of how others are expressing themselves, we have to sense that they have needs too. So everybody involved, we understand, has needs. So we express our own needs, we sense the needs of others, we check to see if needs are accurately being received, provide the empathy people need in order to hear the needs of others, and we translate proposed solutions on strategies into positive action language. Now, it's been the experience of Dr. Rosenberg. He says that if we keep our focus on needs, our conflicts tend toward a mutually satisfactory resolution. Keeping our focus on needs, we express our own needs and clearly understand the needs of others and avoid any language that implies wrongness of the other party.
So you keep saying needs. So needs as opposed to wants?
Well, yeah, needs. Let's define needs, because so here are some basic human needs, and we'll put them into categories. Okay.
Okay.
So we have the need for autonomy, which includes to choose your dreams and goals and values, and also to choose one's plans for fulfilling one's dreams and goals and values. We have this need for celebration. So to celebrate the creation of life and dreams fulfilled, or to celebrate losses, loved ones and dreams, in other words, mourning. Okay. We have the need for integrity, which means authenticity, creativity, meaning, and self-worth. We have the need for interdependence. So this would be acceptance, appreciation, closeness, community, consideration, contribution to the enrichment of life, to exercise our power by giving that which contributes to life, emotional safety, empathy, honesty, the empowering honesty that enables us to learn from our limitations, love, reassurance, respect, support, trust, understanding, and warmth. All of those are needs that come under the category of interdependence. We have the need of physical nurturance. So we need air, we need food, we need movement and exercise. We need protection from life-threatening forms of life, viruses, bacteria, insects, predatory animals like that. We need rest. We need sexual expression. We need shelter. We need touch. We need water. Those are physical. That's physical nurturance. We need play. We have a need for play. So for fun and laughter. And finally, last but not least, spiritual communion. We have a need for beauty, for harmony, for inspiration, for order, and for peace. Now, here's the deal, and we'll talk about this after break. He says, unfortunately, he's found that very few people are literate in expressing needs. Instead, and I think this is going to resonate. You're going to hear this and say, yeah. Instead, what we've been trained to do is to criticize, insult, and otherwise communicate in ways that create distance among people. And so as a result, even in conflicts for which resolutions exist, resolutions aren't found. And instead of both parties expressing their own needs and understanding the needs of the other party, both sides play this game of who's right. And that game is more likely to end in various forms of either verbal or psychological or physical violence even than in peaceful resolution of differences. That makes some sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I have a need to be right, that means you have to be wrong.
That's right. That's exactly it. So we're talking about resolving conflicts peacefully and powerfully. The work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg this evening. We'll be back. More strategies to come. Yeah.
He still got it.
Yeah, he does. We can work it out, though. Welcome back into Strategies for Living, 1017 FM, 710 KEEL, and PLPC Carla McCormick, marriage and family therapist, David McMillan, Rapid Ruben right at the controls, doing what he does, picking the music that just makes it flow. He just doesn't get any better than that, even though, you fight with him all the time.
Well, I only fight. It's like I love him. We fight like brother and sister.
Brother and sister, yeah.
Yeah, I'm his older sister.
Much to his chagrin. So we're working through this idea of nonviolent communication to resolve conflicts. We've got to understand. We've got to express our own needs. We've got to sense the needs of others regardless of how others are expressing themselves.
Say that again.
We sense the needs of others regardless of how others are expressing themselves. So just off the air a minute ago, you were talking about, you could imagine this family situation where some of them are in the family are liberal, some of them in the family are conservative. So, imagine this being said within your family. Well, I just don't know how anybody could belong to the Democratic Party and call themselves a Christian. Okay.
For some people, those would be fighting words.
Fighting words, and we could turn that around. It doesn't. I'm not trying. I'm not picking on.
Yeah, you can put anything. Fill the blank.
I don't know. It could be the other side could have easily been expressed too. I don't know how anybody could be a member of the Republican Party and call themselves a true Christian.
Correct.
Yeah, it doesn't. So what we're missing here is this idea of sensing the needs of others regardless of how they are expressing themselves. So this is where we so often go off the interstate of resolving conflicts. We get off on the lane of I'm right, you're wrong. And that's the way we express ourselves. Them's fighting words, and off we go.
And it's my job to teach you. It's my job to show you the error of your ways.
Right. So we express our own needs. We sense the needs of others regardless of how they're expressing themselves. We check to see if needs are accurately being received. We provide the empathy people need in order to hear the needs of others, and translating proposed solutions or strategies into positive action language. So, again, he says, Dr. Rosenberg says that unfortunately, very few people are literate in expressing needs, and that is the rub. So since needs are such a vital component of this approach to conflict resolution, we got to clarify what needs are. Needs, as we're using the term, as Dr. Rosenberg uses the term, can be thought of as resources life requires to sustain itself. Let me say that again. Resources life requires to sustain itself. For example, our physical well-being depends on our need for air, water, rest, and food being fulfilled. Our psychological and spiritual well-being is enhanced when our needs for understanding, support, honesty, and meaning are fulfilled. So all human beings have the same needs if you understand how he's defining needs, regardless of our gender, educational level, religious beliefs, nationality. We could go on and say political party, whatever. We have the same needs. What differs from person to person is the strategy for fulfilling the needs. So he says that he's found that it facilitates conflict resolution to keep our needs separate from strategies that might fulfill our needs. One guideline for separating needs from strategies is to keep in mind that needs contain no reference to specific people taking specific action. In contrast, effective strategies, are what are more commonly referred to as wants, our requests, our desires, and solutions. And do refer to specific people. Those do refer to specific people taking specific actions. An exchange between a husband and a wife who had just about given up on their marriage kind of clarifies.
Okay. Because I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, so this kind of clarifies the important difference that he makes between needs and strategies. So Dr. Rosenberg is working with a husband, and he asked the husband what needs of his were not being fulfilled in the marriage. And the husband said, I need to get out of this relationship. So, he's talking about a specific person, himself, taking a specific action, leaving the marriage. And so he was not expressing a need as needs have been defined by Dr. Rosenberg. Instead, he was telling him a strategy that he was thinking of taking. Does that make sense?
To meet the needs.
Yeah, exactly. But he was going to the strategy, and that's what we do. We go to the strategies. So Dr. Rosenberg pointed out to him and suggested that let's delay talking about strategies until we've really clarified both his needs and the needs of his wife. Okay? And when they were able to clarify their needs, well, both of them saw that there were other strategies besides ending the relationship that could meet their needs. And then 2 years from that time, they've developed a relationship within the marriage that is very, very satisfying and satisfactory to both of them.
So what would some of those needs be, Mr. Marriage and Family Therapist?
Well, okay, let's go back to let's go back to the beauty, harmony, inspiration, order, peace. That's spiritual. Play, having fun, laughing. That's play.
So he may say something like, I want to laugh more in our relationship. Yeah. I want to spend more time doing fun things.
Yeah, physical nurturance, food, movement, exercise, sexual expression, shelter, touch, rest.
So those would be his needs.
Yeah, well, it could be his needs, could be her needs. Interdependence, respect, support, love, reassurance, empathy, emotional safety, consideration, a sense of community, acceptance, appreciation, closeness. Think about that. Think about, how many of those do we miss? We can, and how many times do we go to the strategies? I mean, I got to get out of here, instead of focusing on what needs are being, what needs of mine are not being taken care of, what needs of yours are not being taken care of. So he says, if we focus on the needs before we go to the strategies, we're much more likely to solve the conflict. Does that make some sense?
Well, then what about the people who say, I've tried all those things. I've tried asking for what I want.
Well, have we really tried it, or have we really been stuck on the strategies? Have we really been going to the strategy? So many people find it's very difficult to express needs. So this is something that we got to look at, because he says we have a need literacy problem. This lack of need literacy, and it creates problems when people want to resolve conflicts. So as an example, the husband and wife whose attempts to resolve conflicts had led them to visit physical violence upon one another. Okay, well, again, that's terrible, but that's a strategy. Do you see that?
Right.
It's a strategy, and so many times we just up the strategies. We just up until, again, if we do enough physical violence, somebody's going to come and arrest somebody.
Take you away.
Right, take me away. Dr. Rosenberg says, I'd been working in the husband's workplace offering some training. At the end of the training, the husband asked me if he could talk to me privately. He tearfully expressed the situation between his wife and himself, and he asked if Dr. Rosenberg would meet with them and support them in resolving some of their conflicts. And the wife agreed, and so he went there that evening. He began by saying, I'm aware that you're both in a lot of pain. So he didn't go to, oh, you're a bad person for beating up on your husband, or you're a bad person for beating up on your wife. He began by saying, I'm aware that you're both in a lot of pain. I would suggest that we begin with each of you expressing whatever needs of yours are not being fulfilled in the relationship. And once you've understood each other's needs, he told them he was confident that they could explore some strategies to meet those needs. So what he was asking them both to do required a literacy of expressing needs and an ability to understand one another's needs. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do what he suggested. They didn't have the literacy. And instead of expressing his needs, the husband said, the problem with you is that you're totally insensitive to my needs. And so immediately his wife responded by saying, that's so typical of you to say unfair things like that. And then off they went, and you can see how that would go. We oftentimes go to those defense mechanisms, defending, criticizing, contempt, and blaming. He says another time he was working in a company that had a very disturbing conflict for more than 15 months that was creating morale as well as productivity problems. In this conflict, there were two different factions in the same department. The conflict involved which piece of software to use. There were strong emotions involved. One faction had worked very hard to develop the software that was presently being used, and they wanted to continue. And the other faction had some strong emotions tied up with this new piece of software. And so he met with this group. He started in the same way as he did with the husband and wife. He asked both sides to tell him what their needs were that would be better fulfilled with the software that they each advocated. And as in the situation with the husband and wife, he didn't receive a clear expression of needs. Instead, each side responded with an intellectual analysis that the other side received as criticism. So a member from one faction said, "I think that if we continue to be overly conservative, we could be out of work in the future, because to be progressive requires that we take some risk and dare to show that we're beyond old-fashioned ways of doing things." And a member of the other faction said, "But I think that impulsively grabbing for every new thing that comes along is not in our best interest." So they told me that they had been repeating these same analysis with one another for months, and they got nowhere. And in fact, they were creating a whole lot of tension among themselves. So like the husband and wife, they didn't know how to directly express their needs. Instead, they were making analysis and were being heard by the other side as critical. And this is how wars are created, whether we're talking about wars in families, wars between husbands and wives, or wars between countries or factions within countries. So when we're not able to say clearly what we need and only know how to make analysis of others, that sounds like criticism, then wars are never far away, whether they're verbal, psychological, or physical, wars. So we've got to be able to sense the needs of others. This is a key. And when we come back, let's talk about that, as well as checking in to see that needs are accurately perceived and empathy comes into play. Can we do that?
I love empathy.
Yeah. We can work it out. Talking about resolving conflicts peacefully and powerfully today on Strategies.
Waiting for the thaw out on a full moon night in the Rocky Mountain winter.
Welcome back. Welcome back to 101.7 FM, 710 KEEL. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. PLPC Carla McCormick, marriage and family therapist David McMillan, talking about resolving conflicts peacefully and powerfully today through nonviolent communication. That is the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg from the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And you can find them online if you want more information on the center. It's cnvc.org. cnvc.org is the website for the Center for Nonviolent Communication. So here's a deal, Carla. This approach to conflict resolution that Dr. Rosenberg is talking about requires that not only we learn to express our needs, but also that we assist other people. If we're going to do this conflict resolution work, and this whether we're talking in a couple, in our marriage, in our couple relationship, in our family, our workplace or beyond, we've got to help others to clarify their needs too. We've got to care about our needs, but we got to care that everybody else's needs are being met too. So it's sensing the needs of others. We can train ourselves to hear needs being expressed through the messages of others, regardless of how others are expressing themselves. So this is a skill. This is a skill set that we develop.
We do every day.
Yeah, it's something that we're trained to, hopefully, as therapists, it's something that hopefully we're trained to do.
And you can assess that by body language.
Yes. By listening to the words,
what's said and what's not said.
Yes. By watching, if you've got two people in the room or a family in the room, where are we sitting?
Yeah.
How are we like you say, body language? How are we posturing? We listen for defensiveness, for criticism, for contempt, and for putting up stonewalling.
Shutting people out.
Yeah. So. You can. Rosenberg taught himself to do this because he believes that every message, no matter whatever its form of or content, is an expression of a need. Now that's important. Every message, no matter what its form or content, is an expression of a need. If we accept that assumption, we can train ourselves to sense what needs might be at the root of any particular message. So if I ask someone a question about what they've just said and they respond, "That's a stupid question," I choose to sense what the other person might need as expressed through that particular judgment of me. For example, I might guess that their need for understanding was not being fulfilled when I ask that particular question. Or if I request that someone talk with me about some stress in our relationship and they say, "I don't want to talk about it," I might sense that their need is for protection from what they might imagine would happen if we communicate. And so this ability to sense what people need is crucial, Rosenberg says, in mediating conflicts. We can help by sensing what both sides need, put into words, and then we help each side hear the other side's needs. And this creates a quality. This creates a quality of connection that moves the conflict toward successful resolution. So an example of this would be working with groups of married couples. In these groups, I identify the couple with the most long-standing conflict, Rosenberg says, and he makes a rather startling prediction to the group. I predict that we will be able to resolve this long-standing conflict within 20 minutes from the point at which both sides can tell me what the other side needs.
That's the caveat right there, when he gets to the meat, then he can resolve it.
There you go. Once when I was doing this with a group, we identified a couple married for 39 years. They had a conflict about money. 6 months into the marriage, the wife had twice overdrawn the checkbook, and the husband had taken control of the checkbook and wouldn't let her write checks from that point on. And they had been arguing about this for 39 years. Now, when the wife heard the prediction of Dr. Rosenberg, she says, Marshall, I can tell you this, that's not going to happen. I mean, we have a good marriage. We communicate quite well, but in this conflict, we just have different needs about money. I don't see how it can possibly be resolved in 20 minutes. And he corrected her by saying that I hadn't predicted we'd resolve it in 20 minutes. I predicted resolution within 20 minutes after both of you tell me what the other person needs.
Yeah, see?
And she said, but Marshall, we communicate very well, and when you've been talking about something for 39 years, you certainly understand the other side, what the other side needs. And he says, well, I've been wrong before. I certainly could be wrong in this situation, but let's explore. Tell me then if you know what his needs are. What are they? And she said, it's very obvious, Marshall. He doesn't want me to spend any money. And the husband immediately reacted by saying, now that's ridiculous. It was clear that she and I had a different definition of needs. When she said he didn't want her to spend money, she was identifying what he calls a strategy. Even if she was right, she would have been accurate about his desired strategy, not about his need. As I define needs, a need contains no reference to specific action, such as spending money or not spending money. I told her that all human needs have all human beings have the same needs, and I was certain that if she could get clear what her husband's needs were, and if he were clear about her needs, we could resolve this. And I said, can you try again? What do you think his need is? And she said, well, let me explain, Marshall. You see, he's just like my own father. And then she told me how his own father, and she told me how his father was reluctant to spend money. I stopped her and said, hold on, you're giving me an analysis of why he's the way he is. And what I'm asking you to do is simply tell me what need of his is involved in this situation. You're giving me an intellectual analysis of what's gone on in his life. So it was very clear that she didn't know how to identify his need. Even after 39 years of talking, she still didn't have an idea of what his needs were. She had a diagnosis of him. She had an intellectual awareness of what reasons might be his reasons might be for her not wanting to have the checkbook, but she didn't really understand his needs in this situation. So turning to the husband, well, since your wife's not much in touch with what your needs are, and why don't you tell her? What are your needs? What are your needs that are being met by keeping the checkbook yourself? And he said, Marshall, she's a wonderful wife, a wonderful mother, but when it comes to money, she's totally impossible. Now, again, notice the difference between the questions I ask him. What are your needs in this situation? And his response, instead of telling me what his needs were, he gave me a diagnosis that she's irresponsible. And it's that kind of language that he believes gets in the way of resolving conflicts peacefully. And at this point, where either party hears themselves criticized, diagnosed, or intellectually interpreted, the energy is going to turn towards self-defense and counter-accusations rather than towards resolutions that meet everybody's needs. So does this make, can you see, 39 years, and how much talking, and they both love each other, they both even like each other, but they can't get to what are the real needs underneath. 39 years ago, not only once but twice you overdrew the checkbook. So okay, here I'm dealing with the checkbook from this point on. And then she decides, well, he just he doesn't want me to spend money.
And so what did they get? Did we get to the point of resolution?
I think we did get to a point of resolution. Yes, what we had to do was, you had to check in to see that needs are accurately received and provide empathy. We'll come back and finish up with this. We're going to take a break here. We're talking about resolving conflicts peacefully, powerfully today. The work of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and Dr. Marshall Rosenberg.
Is a burning thing, and it makes a fiery ring.
Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living, 101.7 FM, 710 KEEL, talking about resolving conflicts peacefully, powerfully with the nonviolent communication from the Center for Nonviolent Communication, the work of Marshall Rosenberg, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. So in this couple that we've been talking about, 39 years, you know, she bounces a couple of checks in the beginning of the relationship. The relationship otherwise going okay, but for 39 years they've been stuck on this. So what Rosenberg did with him, he says, I sense that he's talking to the wife, I sense that you're feeling hurt and you need to be trusted, that you can learn from past experience. And you could tell her from her eyes that she really needed that understanding. And yes, exactly. And receiving this understanding, he had hoped that she would now be able to hear her husband. So once again, he said he repeated what he understood his needs to be. He needed to protect the family. So I asked her to repeat back what she heard, and she replied, so he thinks I'm spending too much money. Well, as you see, she wasn't trained to hear needs any more than she was trained to express them. So he suggested that she try to just hear the needs without hearing any criticism of herself. And after he repeated it 2 more times, she was finally able to hear her husband's need. And then he reversed the process and asked the wife to express her needs. And again, she wasn't able to do it directly. She expressed her need in the form of judgment. He doesn't trust me. But anyway, once they got down to, he loaned her the skills, and loaned the husband the skills, and they were able then to get to a point where once they understood and accepted each other's needs, it didn't even take 20 minutes to get to a potential solution. So powerful, powerful stuff.
Well, because at that point their defenses were down, and they could be empathetic. Right.
Now you get away from defensiveness, from criticism, from contempt, and from stonewalling. Yeah. Good stuff.
It almost always comes back to empathy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Good job, Carla. You've done it again.
You did it.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to Strategies for Living. We've been brought to you by CADA, the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, Northwest Louisiana. Also by Jerry Anderson State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing Center, by Jacob's Well Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call to make, who would you call? What would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For PLPC Carla McCormick, for Rapid Ruben Wright, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time on Strategies for Living.
This is 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL, Shreveport.
Beefing up the border. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. 5,200 troops now headed to the U.S. southern border as thousands of migrants